Hello, everybody, and welcome to our new chat where I'll be talking with Suzanne from the Independent Landlord, with myself, Richard Jackson from Alphaletz. There's a lot of content to talk to you about today, so we're actually going to break this into a two-part series. So this will be part one, and then we'll follow with part two. Both videos will be uploaded onto YouTube, so you can keep informed, and hope you enjoy the content. Right. Hello, Suzanne. It's fantastic to have this chat with you today. I know our viewers and our customers are going to be very interested in what you're doing. And you've got a brilliant website that I have now subscribed to, and I've been following actively since we first met just a few weeks ago. It's definitely one of the better blogs that I have seen, probably the best. And I don't know how you put out so much content because every day there seems to be something new coming out. And so not only have you got your own portfolio, but you're also a solicitor by trade. Can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, I've given you it in my words, but I'd love to hear it in your words. I'm sure you did much better than I could do justice there.
So I'm Suzanne Smith. I until 2019, I was a solicitor working for mostly in the pharmaceutical industry as an in-house lawyer. And until 2015, property was not remotely on my radar at all. I am obviously, we have bought our own house, which we bought in 1994, a very long time ago. And I'd always thought about investing in property, but I took a job in Cambridge in 2015 and thought instead of renting, I would buy a flat as an investment. And I lived in it for 4 years. And then when that job came to an end, I let it as an accidental landlord. That's 2019. And since then, I've built a small portfolio in Kent, near where I live. So, and it was quite a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
That as a solicitor, I was probably a little bit arrogant, if I can admit that. I thought, oh yeah, I'll just do it. I realised about the gas safety certificates and stuff, and that was the time with the EICRs. Everyone was scrambling around trying to get them, and I didn't, if I'm honest, I didn't really know what I didn't know,
Yeah.
and since then I have been learning what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had a bad experience with letting agents. The first two times I used them, they were great, different ones. And then there was a change of personnel and they were useless. And I began to resent how much I was paying them to find tenants.
Mm.
I've always managed my own properties because I'm too tight to pay for the management fee. And they're nice properties, and
Yeah.
it seemed like money for old rope to pay someone to do it.
Yeah.
So I had a tenant. I got a really lovely tenant through an agent, and the agent was honestly, they drove us both to distraction, took a really long time over the agreements and didn't pass messages on and things. And she said to me, well, why don't you do it yourself on
Mm.
open rent?
Mm.
And so it's like ding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and so I set about, I bought another property, so that was number 4, and I put it on open rent. And I learned so much doing it, and I'd set up an Instagram account called it's called now Indie Landlord. I started writing, doing little reels about it and talking to people about it, and then I just thought, well, why don't I set up a blog? Again, I didn't really realize just how much
Mm.
work it was
Yeah.
going to
Sure. I
involve.
can imagine. Yeah.
So I set it up in August 2022, so not yet 18 months. And my husband had the idea of the Independent Landlord, because so much of the content that you see out there is a sales funnel to a training program, mentorship, or some other service. And so I thought, well, I'll set out to do one blog post a week and one newsletter, giving advice that's impartial, and that's what I've done. Yeah.
It's brilliant. Yeah. And that's what I really loved about your content. And that's why I think, that's why I'd urge all our viewers and customers to sign up to your site. It's completely free. You've already got thousands of subscribers, which is amazing considering your blog is relatively new. We've seen so much change already in the last 4 or 5 years. And, I'm a landlord myself and the co-founder of Alphaletz. And when I started, a spreadsheet was enough, and you could do everything on a spreadsheet and you handed it into your account at the end of the year, and that was about it. But now with all the regulation, there's so much more to it than that. And the general message is from all of us, not just me and you and the NRLA and Paul Champlain and all these other people, is it's really about being a professional landlord, getting organized, getting all your stuff in the right place, and keeping on top of it. Because one bad experience, like a big fine, I think will put landlords either out of business or they'll be forced to sell properties just to pay the fine. So they can be that substantial. So could you tell us what is the Renters Reform Bill and how is it going to affect us?
Yeah, it's certainly quite a big deal, and it's become a bit my specialist topic. Being a lawyer, I actually quite like reading legislation, but then distilling it down and making, so what does this mean? So the Renters Reform Bill, and interesting, the word renter is not in the Renters Reform Bill apart from the title, because it doesn't really mean anything. The legal word is tenant. But anyway, I think there was a feeling that when Margaret Thatcher brought in the Housing Act 1988 and completely revolutionised, freed up the private rented sector, that reform, which then led on to no fault evictions with Section 21, put the balance too much from the tenant to the landlord. And there are some bad landlords around who have been abusing their privileges under the Housing Act. And there has been a big political move to redress the balance a bit, to make it a little more even-handed. Now, don't shoot the messenger on this. This is just this is just the perspective. And so the idea is to make it that the Renters Reform Bill is going to change the Housing Act, the original Housing Act 1988, and some other legislation to make it a little bit more even-handed. We will still have the same basic process.
Yeah. I was looking on the website, obviously the government website, on what it is. I saw Shelter have been talking about it. But what would you say are the most important things from a landlord's perspective that we need to be thinking about or sort of aware of through this?
Well, there are quite a lot of things, but I'll just try and narrow it down. And also, a lot of the detail hasn't come out yet. But what we know so far, and it's still going through Parliament at the moment. We're hopefully going to have the report stage soon. And I say hopefully because I think the Renters Reform Bill will be a lot more pro landlords if it goes through now than if it goes through when Labour get in.
Yeah.
So. The first thing that landlords are really concerned about is the abolition of Section 21. Section 21 is the provision in the Housing Act that lets landlords give notice in certain circumstances without giving a reason, and it's called no fault evictions. And that is going to be abolished. And I think it's highly unlikely that abolition won't go ahead. And instead, people will need to use Section 8, and these are, and for Section 8, you need to have certain grounds to terminate a tenancy. For instance, if you're selling up, which is going to be a new ground, or another new ground is going to be if a tenant is late paying 3 times in 3 years.
And when roughly, I know it's difficult to say, but when do you think that would happen? Section 21 would get abolished?
Okay, so if we say, let's guess that the Renters Reform Bill receives royal assent in June, which is probably pushing it a bit, but say June. The government has previously said that the first set of rules that will come in, that's for new tenants, and not Section 21, will be at least 6 months after that. And then for existing tenants and Section 21 will be another 12 months after that. So we're looking at so possibly the end of next year. Well, it'll be June plus 18 months at the earliest. But then also Michael Gove has said that he's not going to abolish Section 21 until the court reforms have been done, but they've not given much information on that. And the Labour Party wouldn't hang around in implementing that. So I think we probably got, from where we are now, we've probably got at least 2 years before Section 21.
Oh, right. Okay. Because it feels like it's an imminent thing. It's like around the corner. But okay, that's good to know. But I also was reading in the Renters Reform Bill that, so I guess the alternative to Section 21 is Section 8, I'm assuming. And but that is being amended, as I understand, so that there will be, because a lot of landlords are I don't know, they're nervous about change, and for that reason they've been selling up. And one of the things that's forcing or encouraging people to sell up is Section 21. And especially if you're thinking about moving back into your own house or selling your house, then Section 21 is an easy way currently for landlords to do that. So I was reading a little bit that looks like the renters reform will have more in it to help. So it does even it up a little bit more to get around that. Am I right with that? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are going to be a lot of new grounds, and I have a blog post that goes through
Very good. That's what we want.
every single new ground. But for instance, moving yourself or your family into the property will be a ground, and you'll have to prove that. The Labour Party have been trying to get all sorts of restrictions on it, but because the Conservatives have a big majority, it's probably likely that will be fairly easy to prove.
Right.
But a lot depends what happens when it goes through the House of Lords. But there are, and another thing is when renters are in rent arrears, at the moment, it's quite easy for them to just pay down a little bit on the day of court, so that the mandatory ground for rent arrears doesn't kick in. But the new rule is that they have to be even like 1 penny late in paying their rent 3 times in 3 years, and then that will be a mandatory ground for the landlord.
Yeah. Well, that
in other words, to terminate tenancies with tenants who are in arrears.
That is a really good point. So obviously Section 21, you can just, I'm not sure if no fault evictions is the official name or just what it's sort of been nicknamed as. But that is a way where you don't really have to have a reason. You can just ask a tenant. I think you give them 2 months notice and they have to move out. And a lot of them do play the game, because I mean, from a landlord's perspective, if you have a really good landlord who pays rent on time, looks after your property, you never want them to leave, do you? Really, unless you are, genuinely selling your property, or you're going to move back into it. So a lot of them, I think, tenants, and I've had experience myself of tenants who they know this, and if they are bad payers, they do drip feed rent through, so that it makes it very, very difficult to get them out and so on. So that is a really good point. That I think our viewers really need to understand that 3 arrears payments in, what did you say, 3 years, was
3
it?
years.
Right. So that will. So that is that in the Section 8 at the moment, or is that coming in?
No, that's a new one. And there's all sorts of other things like that. But I think the big difference between Section 8 and Section 21 is that Section 8, you have to go to court and prove to a judge that you would have to show proof that they haven't paid their rent, or that you're going to be moving in, or any of the number of other things. Whereas with Section 21, you just serve notice, and as long as you serve the gas safety certificate and all that sort of thing, it will just happen. The judge can't do anything. And then there are discretionary grounds where the judge will have discretion. So, for instance, breach of contract, a good example of this is, say the tenant won't give access for inspections. That's a discretionary ground under Section 8, which would means that if you would need to go to court and explain to the judge, or convince the judge that it's reasonable to evict the tenant because the house is in a state of disrepair, as the landlord is not able to get access. And with all the proof, all the letters and emails, that sort of thing, you would have to be able to document that and prove it.
Absolutely. And a quick plug for Alphaletz, because that's what we do. We help landlords keep organized, and actually when it comes to producing like a rent statement, you can do that with 1 click. So you can create the whole payment history, you can link it to the bank, so you know exactly when the payments came in or didn't come in, and you can produce statements as well. So we've seen this coming for a while, and if anyone out there has had the unfortunate circumstance of having to get rid of a tenant, it can be very, very painful. So keeping notes, the documents, like you say, it's going to be so important. And so many people think that they can continue to manage properties on a spreadsheet, but I think those days are closing very, very, very fast. And to your point, it's just so important to have your information, up to date.
I agree. And it doesn't matter if you have one property or 100 properties. We all need to be professional now. It's not something to do half-baked.
Yeah.
And it's not something to trust your letting agents to do. Even this morning, somebody I have a Facebook group for the independent landlord community. Somebody posted in the group and said that there'd been a leak in their property. The tenant had reported a repair, and the agent didn't follow up on it, and the agent didn't do an inspection, and now there's a huge repair, and whose fault is it? And well, I think is the agent's fault, but also we have to take responsibility as landlords. I would, if I don't use letting agents, but if people do want to use letting agents, they should set a note in their calendar to follow up and say, when's the inspection going to be? Can I see a copy of the report? And to ask for a copy of the repair log, and to be told if their tenants in repairs. In arrears. And this person who posted the question didn't know they were in arrears and didn't know that there'd been a repair, and then all of a sudden there's this horrible drama of a leak. Because the agents asleep on the job, but also, we have to be responsible for our own businesses. And as the saying goes, trust but verify.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You said something very interesting to me when we last spoke, which was, I was telling you about an issue I had with an agent, and the tenant had reported issues to the agent, but the agent hadn't told me. So 6 months later, the little thing, which was a leak from the shower, had become a big thing, and it was now dripping through the roof of the flat underneath it. And that was the first I heard of it. And your comment was, well, the agent is actually in breach of contract. And it would be very easy for me to replace them. And I hadn't even thought of that, but I'd already been having some challenges with this agent. So it's things like that we need to know as landlords, because we are going to be very much more under the spotlight. Every time you turn on the TV or listen to the radio, it's landlord bashing, and we've got to be on it. We've got to be all over this stuff.
And I think we also need to be more demanding, like the old advert went, and that if we're paying somebody a lot of money to manage our properties, we need to make sure they're doing it properly. And so this kind of let and forget that people say, it's just wrong. You have to follow up and not be trusting, and make sure that they're qualified, because anyone can set up as a letting agent as long as they're not a criminal or bankrupt. And they don't have to have any training, and so they might not know anything. It's one of the solicitors have to have training and have to be qualified, and you still get useless solicitors. So it doesn't. It's not the answer to everything.
It's everywhere.
It's not the answer to everything, but at least it's a start if you know that they do understand the basic law. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
So do you is it going to end up costing landlords more money to comply with the Renters Reform Bill, do you think?
A little bit. I mean, I would say, unless if you're wanting to evict a tenant, yes, that's going to cost a lot more, because it's not going to be so straightforward. You're going to have to be employing lawyers or having a lot of evidence and doing it yourself and going to court. But there's a few other changes. There's the property portal. It's also called the private centre database. I think they've come up with a logo yet, and we still don't know exactly what we're going to have to put in there, but no doubt there'll be a fee for that. And also there'll be a fee for the housing, not the housing ombudsman, it's the property ombudsman for the private rented sector, who is actually going to be the housing ombudsman organisation, which is the organisation that's used for social housing. So they're going to have the two. It's been announced, the two in the same thing. So landlords will have to pay for that, I shouldn't think that they're going to be expensive, but then there'll be all the indirect costs of making sure that everything's uploaded. People might be using virtual assistants, or they just have to be really organized themselves.
Yeah.
And there are lots of there's a really big new penalty, which is at the moment there are rent repayment orders for a list of things, for instance, like ignoring an improvement notice or running an unlicensed HMO. They're adding to that list some offences from the Renters Reform Bill, which is not uploading appropriate things onto the database, and offences relating to the Property Ombudsman. And the big thing is, the big thing is that instead of 1 year's rent for the rent repayment order, it's going to be 2 years' rent. So
Wow.
if you get into difficulty and you mislead, you upload misleading things. Now, I don't know how this is going to happen in practice, because mistakes do happen. If you've got a portfolio, you might put up the wrong gas safety certificate or something. But that's something that we certainly need to.
Well, that has been a very, very informative chat, and I'm sure our viewers and our customers will love to get up to speed on this stuff. And I'm sure there'll be more change in the future as well. So where can people go to keep in contact with what you're writing about and stay informed?
So my blog is called theindependentlandlord.com, or one word.com.
Okay.
Independentlandlord.com. It's all free. There's nothing behind a paywall. That's the easiest way. I'm also on social media on Instagram, Indie, INDIE _landlord, and it's the same on Twitter as well. And I used to do TikTok, but I stopped doing that. I think I'm a bit old for TikTok. And I'm on LinkedIn as well.
I love it. I love it. And I think, the landlord community, one thing I really like about the landlord community is that everyone can talk to each other. We don't compete with each other. So it's a very open community, but it's not always that easy to find places to go. And we're the same. We are trying to create a community at Alphaletz. We do a free trial so people can get on and just see for themselves how digital transformation really will have an impact on their business. And maybe not necessarily, or they may not think it will impact them today, but over time, it's just going to get more and more critical to get organized and get your information in one place. We're going to be forced to do it one way or another, so we should start doing it now. And I totally concur with everything you said. I think, and that's why I was so keen to talk to you today, because I think your information is great. I've subscribed, by the way, everyone, and I love the content, and hopefully we'll be lucky enough to get Suzanne back on our channel at some point in the future and have another chat, because I think that's been really useful information today.
Well, thank you. And if any of you do subscribe and you get my newsletter on a Friday, I try and send it by 9 o'clock on a Friday morning. I write it in the morning. I think what's been done of me, and it is all me doing it. I don't have any minions running around. If there's a typo, it's my fault. But anyway, if when you get the newsletter, reply, because I'm a real person behind it, and I'll reply back. So it's nice because it builds a community. Is how I'm feeling it. And come and join us on Facebook if you're a landlord, but not if you're trying to sell people something.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. And we'll get this put onto our YouTube channel as well, and make sure that people can subscribe and hear about what's going on, and keep following us both.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Suzanne.